The Cone. Adapted by H.G. Wells. The night was hot and cloudy, the sky red at the edges with the leftover light from the summer sunset. They sat by the open window, trying to believe the air felt cooler there. The trees and bushes in the garden stood still and dark. Out on the road, a gas lamp burned, bright orange against the soft blue of the evening. Farther away were the three lights of the railway signal under the lowering sky. The man and woman spoke to each other in quiet voices. "He doesn't know?" said the man a little nervously. "Not him," she said crossly, like that also made her angry. "He thinks only about the factory and the cost of fuel. He has no imagination, no feeling for beauty." "None of these iron men do," he said seriously. "They have no hearts." "He doesn't," she said. She turned her unhappy face toward the window. A far-off sound of roaring and rushing came closer and got louder. The house shook. They heard the metal noise of the engine. As the train passed, there was a flash of light above the track and a wild cloud of smoke. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 black shapes, 8 trucks, passed over the pale gray of the hill, and then were suddenly gone, one by one, into the tunnel, which, with the last truck, seemed to swallow the whole train, smoke and sound in one big gulp. "This land was all clean and lovely once," he said, "and now it is like hell. That way, nothing but factories and chimneys throwing fire and smoke into the sky. But what does it matter? An end comes, an end to all this pain. Tomorrow." He said the last word in a whisper. "Tomorrow," she said, whispering too, still looking out of the window. "Dear," he said, putting his hand on hers. She turned quickly, and they looked into each other's eyes. Her look softened when she saw him. "My dear one," she said, and then, "It feels so strange that you came into my life like this, to open—" She stopped. "To open?" he said. "All this wonderful world," she paused and spoke even more softly. "This world of love to me." Then suddenly the door clicked and shut. They turned their heads, and he jumped back in shock. In the dark part of the room stood a big, shadowy shape, silent. They could just see the face in the dim light, with dark, unreadable spots under heavy eyebrows. All the muscles in Raut's body became tight. When had the door opened? What had he heard? Had he heard everything? What had he seen? So many questions rushed through his mind. The new person spoke at last after a long, heavy silence. "Well?" he said. "I was afraid I had missed you, Horrocks," said the man at the window, holding tightly to the window ledge. His voice was shaky. The large shape of Horrocks stepped forward out of the shadow. He didn't answer what Raut said. For a moment, he stood over them. The woman felt her heart turn cold inside her. "I told Mr. Raut that you might come back," she said in a voice that didn't shake at all. Horrocks still said nothing and suddenly sat down in the chair by her little work table. His big hands were closed into fists. Now they could see the fire in his eyes under his heavy brows. He was trying to catch his breath. His eyes moved from the woman he had trusted to the friend he had trusted, and then back to the woman. By now, and for a short moment, all three of them half understood what was going on. But no one dared to say anything to let out the heavy feelings trapped inside them. It was the husband's voice that broke the silence at last. "You wanted to see me?" he said to Raut. Raut jumped when he spoke. "I came to see you," he said, choosing to lie until the end. "Yes," said Horrocks. "You promised," said Raut, "to show me some good sights of moonlight and smoke." "I promised to show you some good sights of moonlight and smoke," repeated Horrocks in a flat voice. "And I thought I might find you tonight before you went down to the factory," Raut went on, "and go with you." There was another pause. Did the man mean to stay calm? Did he really know what was going on? How long had he been in the room? Even when they heard the door, their positions. Horrocks looked at the woman's face from the side, pale in the dim light. Then he looked at Raut and seemed to suddenly come back to himself. "Of course," he said, "I promised to show you the factory at the right dramatic moment. Strange that I forgot." "If I'm bothering you," Raut began. Horrocks moved again. A new look suddenly came into the hot darkness of his eyes. "Not at all," he said. "Have you been telling Mr. Raut about all those differences of fire and shadow you think are so wonderful?" said the woman, turning to her husband for the first time, her confidence coming back, her voice just a little too high. "That awful idea of yours that machines are beautiful and everything else in the world is ugly. I thought he wouldn't let you get away with that, Mr. Raut. It's his big idea, his one discovery in art." "I am slow to find new things," said Horrocks in a cold voice, cutting her off quickly. "But what I find—" He stopped. "Well?" she said. "Nothing." And suddenly he stood up. "I promised to show you the factory," he said to Raut, and put his big, clumsy hand on his friend's shoulder. "And you're ready to go?" "Yes," said Raut, and stood up too. There was another pause. Each one looked through the dim evening light at the other two. Horrocks' hand was still on Raut's shoulder. Raut still partly thought this was all a small matter after all. But Mrs. Horrocks knew her husband better. She knew that cold sound in his voice, and the confusion in her heart began to feel like something truly bad. "Very well," said Horrocks, and dropped his hand, then turned toward the door. "My hat?" Raut looked around in the dim light. "That's my sewing basket," said Mrs. Horrocks with a sudden burst of nervous laughter. Their hands touched on the back of the chair. "Here it is," he said. She felt a strong urge to warn him quietly, but she couldn't form the words. "Don't go!" and "watch out for him" were in her mind, but the quick moment passed. "Got it?" said Horrocks, standing with the door half open. Raut stepped toward him. "Better say goodbye to Mrs. Horrocks," said the ironmaster, his voice even more quiet and serious than before. Raut jumped a little and turned. "Good evening, Mrs. Horrocks," he said, and their hands touched. Horrocks held the door open with a kind of formal politeness he didn't usually show to other men. Raut walked out, and then, after a long look at her without words, her husband followed. She stood still while Raut's light steps and her husband's heavy ones, like high and low notes in music, went down the hallway together. The front door closed with a loud bang. She walked slowly to the window and stood there watching, leaning forward. The two men appeared for a moment at the gate by the road, passed under the street lamp, and were hidden by the dark shapes of the bushes. The lamplight showed their faces for just a second, only pale shapes that told her nothing about what she still feared, wondered about, and desperately wanted to understand. Then she dropped down into a crouching position in the big armchair, her eyes wide open and staring at the red lights from the factory fires that flickered in the sky. An hour later, she was still there, her body hardly moved. The heavy stillness of the evening felt like a weight on Raut. They walked side by side down the road without speaking, and still silent, turned onto the cinder path that soon opened up a view of the valley. A blue haze, part dust and part mist, covered the long valley and made it feel mysterious. Far away were Hanley and Etruria, gray and dark shapes, with a few golden street lamps and now and then a window lit by gas or the yellow glow from a factory still working late or a crowded pub. Out of the dark shapes, tall chimneys rose into the evening sky, many giving off smoke, a few with none during a time of rest. Here and there, pale patches and strange short beehive shapes showed where there were pot banks or wheels. Black and sharp against the hot lower sky stood the towers of coal mines, where they dug up the shiny coal of the area. Closer was the wide railway, where almost hidden trains moved around. There was steady puffing and rumbling, each move ending with a loud bang and a pattern of bumps, and now and then white steam blew across the view. And to the left, between the railway and the dark hill beyond it, standing over everything, huge, black, and smoky with sudden flames, were the big cylinders of the Jetta Company blast furnaces. These were the main buildings of the large iron factory where Horrocks was the manager. They looked heavy and frightening, always full of fire and bubbling hot iron, and at their base the rolling mills rattled, and the steam hammer hit with loud beats, throwing white iron sparks in every direction. Even as they watched, a cart full of fuel was dumped into one of the huge furnaces. Red flames flashed out, and a storm of smoke and black dust rose up into the sky. "You certainly get some color with your furnaces," said Raut, breaking the silence that had started to feel tense. Horrocks grunted. He stood with his hands in his pockets, frowning down at the misty railway and the busy iron factory beyond, frowning like he was trying to solve a hard problem. Raut looked at him, and then looked away again. "Right now your moonlight scene isn't quite ready," he said, looking up. "The moon is still covered by the last bit of daylight." Horrocks stared at him like a man who had just woken up. "Last bit of daylight? Of course, of course." He also looked up at the moon, still pale in the midsummer sky. "Come along," he said suddenly, and grabbing Raut's arm, started walking toward the path that went down to the railway. Raut held back. Their eyes met, and in that moment, they both understood many things their mouths almost spoke. Horrocks's hand tightened, then let go, and before Raut noticed, they were walking arm in arm, one of them very unwilling, down the path. "Look at the nice lights from the railway signals toward Burslem," said Horrocks, suddenly talking a lot, walking fast and holding Raut's arm even tighter. "Little green lights and red and white lights all shining through the mist. You have a good eye for scenes, Raut. It's fine. And look at those furnaces of mine, how they rise up as we go down the hill. That one on the right is my favorite, 70 feet tall. I packed it myself, and it's been boiling happily with iron inside it for 5 long years. I'm especially proud of that one. That red line there, you'd call it a lovely warm orange, Raut. That's the puddler's furnaces. And there, in the bright light, 3 black shapes. Did you see that white flash from the steam hammer just now? That's the rolling mills. Come on, clang, clatter, hear it banging across the floor. Sheet tin, Raut, amazing stuff. Even glass mirrors can't beat it when it comes fresh from the mill. And squish, there goes the hammer again. Come along." He had to stop talking to catch his breath. His arm was twisted around Raut's with a painful tightness. He had rushed down the dark path to the railway like a man taken over by something. Raut hadn't said a word, just pulled back with all his strength against Horrocks's grip. "I say," he said now, laughing nervously but with a hint of anger in his voice, "why in the world are you squeezing my arm off, Horrocks, and dragging me along like this?" At last, Horrocks let go of him. His mood changed again. "Squeezing your arm off?" he said. "Sorry, but you're the one who taught me how to walk in that friendly way." "You haven't learned the gentle part of it yet then," said Raut, laughing in a fake way again. "By Jove, I'm covered in bruises." Horrocks didn't say sorry. They were now standing near the bottom of the hill, close to the fence beside the railway. The ironworks had grown larger and seemed to spread out as they got closer. They now looked up at the blast furnaces instead of down at them. The view of Etruria and Hanley had disappeared as they came down the hill. In front of them, next to the stile, was a sign that still could be read a little in the dim light. It said, "Beware of the trains," partly hidden by splashes of black, muddy coal. "Nice sights," said Horrocks, waving his arm. "Here comes a train. The puffs of smoke, the orange light, the round headlight in front, the musical rattle. Nice sights. But these furnaces of mine used to be even better, before we put cones in the top and saved the gas." "How?" said Raut. "Cones?" "Cones, my friend, cones. I'll show you one closer. The flames used to shoot out of the open tops, big, pillars of cloud in the day, red and black smoke, and pillars of fire at night. Now we collect the gas in pipes and burn it to heat the blast, and the top is closed with a cone. You'll find that cone interesting. But every now and then," said Raut, "I still see fire and smoke burst out. The cone isn't fixed in place. It hangs by a chain from a lever, and it's balanced with a counterweight. You'll see it up close. Otherwise, of course, we couldn't get fuel into the furnace. Now and then the cone lowers, and out comes the flare." "I get it," said Raut. He looked over his shoulder. "The moon is getting brighter," he said. "Come on," said Horrocks suddenly, grabbing his shoulder again and moving him quickly toward the railway crossing. Then something happened. One of those fast, clear moments that happens so quickly it leaves you shocked and unsure. Halfway across, Horrocks's hand suddenly gripped him like a vice and spun him around halfway so he was facing up the tracks. And there, a line of train windows lit with lamps was coming fast, and the red and yellow lights of the engine grew bigger and bigger as it rushed toward them. When he realized what was happening, he turned his face to Horrocks and pushed with all his strength against the arm holding him between the rails. The fight lasted only a second. Just as it seemed sure that Horrocks was keeping him there, it was also clear he had been pulled hard out of danger. "Out of the way," said Horrocks, breathing hard as the train roared past, and they stood catching their breath by the gate into the ironworks. "I didn't see it coming," said Raut, still trying, even though he was scared, to act like everything was normal. Horrocks answered with a grunt. "The cone," he said, and then, like someone getting control of himself, "I thought you didn't hear it." "I didn't," said Raut. "I wouldn't have let you get run over for anything," said Horrocks. "For a moment I lost my nerve," said Raut. Horrocks stood still for half a minute, then suddenly turned again toward the ironworks. "Look how great these big piles of mine look at night. Those heaps of waste, the clinker heaps. That cart over there, up high. There it goes, tipping the hot slag. See the glowing red stuff sliding down the hill. As we get closer, the pile rises and blocks the view of the blast furnaces. See the flicker above the big one. Not that way. This way, between the heaps. That path goes to the puddling furnaces, but I want to show you the canal first." He came over and took Raut by the elbow, and they walked side by side. Raut gave short, unclear answers. He was asking himself what had really happened on the train tracks. Was he just imagining things, or had Horrocks really held him in front of the train? Had he almost been murdered? What if this slow-moving, angry-looking man actually did know something? For a minute or two, Raut was truly scared for his life, but that feeling faded as he tried to think clearly. Maybe Horrocks hadn't heard anything. After all, he had pulled him out of the way just in time. His strange behavior might just be the same kind of jealousy he'd shown once before. Now he was talking about the ash piles and the canal. "Eh?" said Horrocks. "What?" said Raut. "Oh yes, the mist in the moonlight, very nice." "Our canal," said Horrocks, suddenly stopping. "Our canal in moonlight and firelight is amazing. You've never seen it? Imagine that. You've spent too many of your nights wandering around Newcastle with women. I'm telling you, for rich color and drama, but you'll see. Boiling water." As they came out of the maze of clinker heaps and piles of coal and ore, the noise from the rolling mill suddenly hit them, loud, close, and clear. 3 shadowy workers walked by and tipped their caps to Horrocks. Their faces were hard to see in the darkness. Raut felt a sudden need to say something to them, but before he could find the words, they had already passed into the shadows. Horrocks pointed to the canal, now just in front of them. It looked strange in the red glow from the furnaces. The hot water that cooled the tuyères flowed into it about 50 yards ahead, a noisy, almost boiling stream, and steam rose up from the water in soft white wisps and lines. It wrapped around them in damp air, like ghost after ghost rising from the black and red swirls in the water, a white mist that made Raut's head spin. The shiny black tower of the largest blast furnace rose above them out of the fog, and its loud noise filled their ears. Raut stayed back from the water's edge and kept his eyes on Horrocks. "Here the steam is red," said Horrocks. "Red like blood, hot and fiery like sin. But over there, where the moonlight touches it and it moves across the heaps, it looks as white as death." Raut turned his head for a moment, then quickly looked back at Horrocks. "Let's go to the rolling mills," said Horrocks. His grip didn't feel so threatening this time, and Raut felt a little less afraid. But still, what was Horrocks talking about? White as death and red as sin? Was it just a strange choice of words? They stood behind the puddlers for a while, and then went into the rolling mills. There, with constant loud banging, the big steam hammer smashed the juice out of the soft, glowing iron, while black, half-naked workers rushed to push the hot iron bars, like red wax, between the turning wheels. "Come on," Horrocks whispered into Raut's ear. They went and looked through the little glass hole behind the tuyères and saw the wild fire twisting and moving in the furnace pit. It was so bright, it left one of their eyes blinded for a moment. Then, with green and blue spots dancing in the dark, they went to the lift that carried trucks of ore, fuel, and lime up to the top of the big furnace. And out on the narrow rail above the furnace, Raut's doubts came back again. Was it smart to be here? If Horrocks really did know, everything. No matter what he told himself, he couldn't stop shaking all over. Right under his feet was a straight drop of 70 feet. It was a dangerous place. They squeezed past a cart full of fuel to get to the railing at the edge of the furnace. The smoke from the furnace, a sulfur-smelling vapor mixed with bitter, stinging smells, seemed to make the far-off hill at Hanley tremble. The moon had come out now from behind drifting clouds, halfway up the sky above the rolling, wooded hills of Newcastle. Below them, the steaming canal ran away under a blurry-looking bridge and disappeared into the hazy, flat land toward Burslem. "That's the cone I was telling you about," shouted Horrocks. "And below it, 60 feet of fire and melted metal, with blast air bubbling through it like gas in soda water." Raut held on tightly to the railing and stared down at the cone. The heat was burning hot. The boiling iron and the blast of air made a loud, roaring sound beneath Horrocks's voice. But it was too late to turn back now. Maybe, just maybe. "In the middle," shouted Horrocks. "It's almost 1,000 degrees. If you were dropped in there, you'd catch fire in a second, like a bit of gunpowder in a candle. Put your hand out and feel the heat from its breath. Why, even up here I've seen rainwater boil off the trucks. And that cone there, it's way too hot to bake a cake on. The top side is 300 degrees. 300 degrees, said Raut. 300 centigrade, remember? Said Horrocks. It would boil the blood right out of you in no time. Eh? Said Raut, turning around. Boil the blood out of you in— No, you don't. Let me go! Screamed Raut. Let go of my arm! With one hand he grabbed the railing, then with both hands. For a moment, the two men stood swaying. Then suddenly, with a strong pull, Horrocks yanked him away from the railing. Raut tried to grab Horrocks and missed. His foot stepped back into empty space. In the air he twisted his body, and then his cheek, shoulder, and knee all hit the hot cone at the same time. He grabbed the chain that held the cone, and the cone dropped just a tiny bit as he hit it. A ring of glowing red appeared around him, and a burst of flame, freed from the burning chaos inside, flicked upward toward him. A sharp pain hit his knees, and he could smell his hands burning. He stood up and tried to climb the chain, but then something struck his head. Black and shiny in the moonlight, the furnace's throat rose around him. He saw Horrocks standing above by one of the fuel carts on the rail. The figure waved its arms, bright and white in the moonlight, and was shouting, "Burn, you fool! Burn, you chaser of women! You hot-blooded dog! Boil! Boil! Boil!" Suddenly, Horrocks grabbed a handful of coal from the cart and threw it on purpose, piece after piece, at Raut. "Horrocks!" cried Raut. "Horrocks!" He held tightly to the chain, crying out, trying to pull himself away from the burning cone. Every piece of coal Horrocks threw hit him. His clothes burned and began to glow, and as he struggled, the cone lowered, and a blast of hot, choking gas rushed out and wrapped around him in a fast burst of flame. He no longer looked like a person. When the short red light faded, Horrocks saw a burned, blackened shape. Its head was bleeding. It still held onto the chain, shaking in pain. No longer human, just a burnt creature crying out with broken, sobbing screams. Suddenly, when Horrocks saw this, his anger disappeared. A terrible sickness came over him. The strong smell of burning flesh rose to his nose. His mind became clear again. "God have mercy on me!" he cried. "Oh God, what have I done?" He knew the thing below him, even though it still moved and felt pain, was already a dead man, that the poor man's blood must be boiling inside his body. The full horror of that pain hit him and took over all his thoughts. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. Then he turned to the cart and quickly dumped all its coal onto the struggling shape that had once been Raut. The heavy load hit with a loud thud and spread over the cone. With that thud, the screaming stopped, and a wild mix of smoke, dust, and flame rushed up toward him. When it passed, the cone was clear again. Then he stumbled back, shaking all over, holding onto the rail with both hands. His lips moved, but no words came out. Down below he heard voices and the sound of people running. The loud banging from the rolling mill stopped all at once.